Music is an often unmentioned part of Doctor Who, which is a lot more important than you might think. It can go towards helping develop an atmosphere or to generate tension or emotions, lots of important things like that. However, to make the fact it's seldom talked about worse, when it is mentioned, it's always about Murray Gold or very occasionally Dudley Simpson, despite so many other composers making some unique contributions to the show, as well as directors superbly using stock music on occasion. It's a shame that so much brilliant and atmospheric music goes unnoticed, hence I've decided to do something about it. My plan is to occasionally single out a Doctor, picking out some of the more notable scores and discussing them, finally giving these talented composers some recognition by talking about what makes their music work and not work in the various stories they are in. Obviously, whether I continue this series is based upon how interested you are in seeing more of these, but I do think it's a rather interesting subject. So without further ado, let's get atmospheric with the music of the Hartnell years. The Hartnell era was not only the show's pioneer years, but also one of its lowest budgeted, which led to a bit of a patchwork in terms of incidental music. They couldn't afford it for every story, often using stock music, and what stories they did have it for were on a slim budget, meaning they couldn't afford many instruments. However, despite this, some brilliant and very atmospheric work, which was sometimes even revolutionary for its day, made its way onto the show, and some of it still stands out as my favourite of the show in its entirety. The Daleks, composed by Tristram Cary. You may not have heard of Mr. Cary, but he was a real pioneer of his time, composing what was then this new, artificial, electronic music, and this track he did for Doctor Who is a great example of that. It's creepy, it's weird, even foreboding, and to this very day it lets the corridors and forests of Skaro ooze with tension. It's easily one of my favourite scores for Doctor Who, and it must have scared the life out of people back then, being something so different to what they were used to. So good was this piece that it was later reused in The Rescue, The Ark and The Power of the Daleks. The last of said list, it was used to absolute perfection. Though there's a good chance the money saved may have been a bigger factor in its reuse rather than artistic merit. Either way, it's brilliant stuff and goes to show just how ahead of its time a lot of Doctor Who was. The Keys of Marinus and the Sensorites, composed by Norman Kay. These two scores are a little more obscure, but I thought, what the hell, they're worth a mention. They are composed by Norman Kay, who fans of extremely obscure BBC sci-fi will recognise as the composer for the theme of Out of the Unknown. I decided to lump the Sensorites in with Keys, as the music for the former is more or less identical to that in episode 1 of Keys. That part of his score is pretty good. It has a rather distinctive feel that you wouldn't mistake for anything else, which is something I really like about the sound in Kay's scores. In the Keys of Marinus, the music varies between episodes to fit the changing locations, and it works really well. My favourites are the Snows of Terror and the Sentence of Death in terms of score. The former has a very isolated, lost feel, while the latter helps convey the large, harsh power of the law in the city of Millennius. Unfortunately, the isolated score is lost to time, like many episodes and scores of its time, so you'll have to watch the original episodes and hear them that way. The Reign of Terror, composed by Stanley Myers. Quite a departure from the last two scores, this being a score that uses more traditional instruments. It definitely fits the feel of revolutionary France, just like how eerie artificial music fits your sci-fi scares. It has a very militaristic feel, which makes sense as the armed forces and the citizen militia played a huge part in revolutionary France, and it goes from sounding lost and hopeless to upbeat and filled with optimism. This in a way reflects the revolution, although to what extent this was intentional ranges from limited to me just talking out of my arse. Fortunately, fragments of the score do survive on YouTube, however I don't think it's the entire thing. The Daleks' Invasion of Earth, composed by Francis Chagrin. Notable, yes. Particularly good, no. This is probably a good example of a score done rather badly. Sure, it's quite good in episode 1, getting across the desolate feel of the world. However, once they meet other people, that part of the score doesn't work too well anymore. The rest of the score is pretty crap and barely used. To sum up, the music is just like everything about the production of this story, lazy. You'd think they'd have put more effort into such an important story. I've said it before, but man, the direction is appalling in this episode. But now we're getting off-piste. The Web Planet, stock music by Les Structures Sorones. Oh, the Web Planet, how loved and hated you are. I know, as I've been at both extremes myself. Currently I quite like it, but it'll never be as good as when I watched it when I was rather young. That's when it's most magical. For the score of this very alien episode, they acquired some stock music which was later partially reused in Galaxy 4, and suffice to say it works really well. It sounds very out there, for lack of a better phrase, and it really suits this bizarre little gem. It's rather atmospheric too, which is more or less a requirement for Doctor Who music in my opinion, and I'd certainly say this is a great one. with the exception of the really obnoxious 5-second bit for when we first see the Zarbi. The Chase, composed by Dudley Simpson. Get used to his name as we'll be seeing him a lot during this series. Doctor Who's longest serving composer started earlier this season with the Planet of the Giants, but it's not particularly noteworthy music, but at least deserves to be mentioned here as Dudley's first. So this score kind of works, but there's a lot of room for improvement. It all suits the very light-hearted nature and very 60s nature of the story, with a swinging start to every story with that little piece that plays over the name of each episode. I do quite like the music when the Daleks and the TARDIS are passing through the vortex. It's full of childlike wonder while sounding empty and large, which really suits it. Nothing of note beyond that. The Daleks versus the Mechanoids music didn't really come out too well, but I can kind of see what he was trying to do. The haunted house music is nicely spooky though, despite the episode being very, very stupid. The Daleks' Master Plan, composed by Tristram Cary. Another very good score from Mr. Cary. Sure, it's nowhere near as good as his original Daleks one, but it still really works. You feel very lost while listening to it, which is great as it's helping the effect of the Doctor and crew running away in space from the Daleks, and damn, it just sounds great. The score definitely starts off stronger and more atmospheric. The Kemble stuff in episode 2, for instance, I particularly love. I'm a fan of the rather harrowing and slow-moving tune that plays during the activation of the Time Destructor in episode 12. Sadly, that's the only bit in the latter part of the story that really sticks out to me. It all starts to sound a bit samey, with the exception of the ancient Egyptian stuff. At the end of the day, while it's great, it just isn't nearly as good as the original Dalek score, but that's no slight considering how good and revolutionary that piece was. Overall, it's a decent score, but it could be better. The Ballad of the Last Chance Saloon, composed by Tristram Cary. I have to say I didn't realise this was another Cary-composed score. But oh well, this was the song that worked as the framing device for The Gunfighters, which is a Wild West episode of Doctor Who, and despite the fact that many hate the song and find it annoying, I love it. It's fun, it's catchy, and it really works at pitching the atmosphere and parts of the story. It just hits all the right notes for me. Of course, complain all you like, but no one can deny it's extremely fitting for the Wild West setting. It uses the kind of instruments they stereotypically would have used back then. Overall, this is really the Marmite of Doctor Who soundtracks, and it definitely had a lot of effort put into it no matter what you think. And fun fact, the singer of the song appears in Doctor Who later on to play roles in Enlightenment and Closing Time. The 10th Planet, stock music. Despite being stock, this is arguably one of the most famous bits of Classic Who incidental music, most famously being reused in the Tomb of the Cybermen and also appearing in the Web of Fear. Its most notable usage was in the jaw-dropping scene where the Cybermen emerge from their tombs in the icy underground refrigeration units of Telos. It almost acted as the Cyberman's theme for a while. It's really good stuff and works in a variety of scenarios, manages to combine epic with subtle and builds a really nice atmosphere. Obviously, we can't give the Doctor Who production team kudos for making it as it's stock, but we can still appreciate that it's a great piece and one that was well chosen. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I hope that those of you who didn't know much about Classic Who incidental music have been a bit enlightened, and have shown that there's more to the Doctor Who music than just Murray Gold or Dudley Simpson. So tell me in the comments if you'd be interested in seeing me continue this series, as I hope you've enjoyed it. And that's it for now, and I'll see you back next time in another video.